Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Hey everybody, I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars, the show dedicated to helping you take your recordings to the next level. I interview professionals from all angles of the studio to get an inside view at what it takes to become a rock star of the recording studio yourself. I'm totally psyched to welcome today's guest. He is a Grammy Award-winning mixer, owner of the beautiful and newly relocated Sputnik Sound here in Nashville, Tennessee, in Berry Hill. Oh, almost got a typo there. I'm from East Nashville. Our guest is not. He has a long discography of accomplished records, including artists and not limited to Keb&rsquo, Jars of Clay, Jack White and Third Man Records, Buddy Guy, Kings of Leon, Danger Mouse, Sturgill Simpson, and some well-known local artists like Moon Taxi, Bobby Bear Jr., and Jeff The Brotherhood, who live right down the street from me, in fact, over in actual East Nashville there.
Well, Jake actually lives right down the street here.
Oh, does it? Well,
Jake lives over in Melrose.
Okay, so maybe they're split.
He lives in my neighborhood.
Maybe the Brotherhood, it's across the river. It's kind of like, the north-south thing.
It's
the east-west thing.
Yeah, it's a drummer.
Our guest, whose voice you just heard, originally hails from the town of Joplin, Missouri, which most people often mistake as being named after the ragtime pianist Scott Joplin, but it was in fact named after its founder, the Reverend Joplin. And other than being mentioned in Bobby Troupe's legendary song Route 66, the town of Joplin, Missouri, which gained most of its notoriety for mining zinc, may owe its biggest musical credit to our guest on today's show. I met him back in the early 2000s when he became head engineer for the incredible Blackbird Studios around the corner from here in the city of Berry Hill, which is a part of Nashville, often referred to as the New Music Row, with over 20 recording studios in a 3-mile radius. How many? Was it more than that?
We were number 50.
Number 50. Excellent. Excellent. Wow.
By the way.
So wait, are you still number 50 or do you like to think of yourself as number one now?
We're 50, but there's now 51 being built down the street.
Wow. I'm super honored to be here at Sputnik Sound for this episode of Recording Studio Rockstars. Please welcome Vance Powell. Vance, are you ready to rock?
I'm ready to rock. I'm always ready to rock.
Awesome, dude. Well, this is really exciting to be here. I really appreciate you inviting me into your studio and allowing us.
Glad you came over.
To be here and talk to you. I've given a little bit of an introduction. Would you like to tell us a little bit in your own words about who you are and how you got to be here?
Well, I'm a kid from a small town in Missouri who loved music and loved technology, kind of all at the same time. My grandparents were, one of my grandfathers was an engineer in the old sense. He was actually an engineer in the mines. He ran engines, very large engines.
Really, in the zinc mines of Joplin, Missouri.
Lead and zinc mines, yeah, all around there. And then my other grandfather was a brick mason who dabbled in electricity, and he dabbled in electronics, I should say. And after World War II, he actually he kind of invented a couple things, which a lot of people don't know anything about, but are sort of kind of pretty common in certain worlds. It's a long, weird story, but he invented a remote control system for model trains that was a pulse code modulated analog radio frequency signal that would move his crane left and right and raise and lower the boom and all this stuff. And he just came up with it himself, all vacuum tube. And then in the 60s, he was asked to put an alarm system in a bank in a very small town in Missouri called Webb City, Missouri, by a guy who owned literally like a TV repair shop next door. And so he designed this circuit and he built this crazy system for this bank. And he got a meeting. The FBI knocked on his door one day. And they said, "Where did you come up with this?" And he said, "Well, I just kind of invented it." And they said, "Well, we want to talk to you. Will you come with us?" He's like, "Well, now?" Like, yeah, sort of now. And so they, I think they went, he took a meeting up in Kansas City and they asked him not to patent it or to do UL. They basically wanted a couple of the things in it. So it's kind of cool. I can't tell you exactly what it was. It's so long ago for me. And And I don't know much about it, but
Well,
I know that it was an electric eye system for detecting shadows.
So that thing that James Bond always has to like do
I
the
think
funky
that's what it
maneuvers to
was,
dodge
but-
over when he's breaking in.
So one side of my family, my grandfather taught me how to use tools, and the other side was, a brick mason who was a frustrated electronics engineer. And that was Maddie. My dog just ran into Lidge's
Maddie's
mic stand.
making her way around the studio.
Maddie's my 14-and-a-half-year-old schnauzer who is blind. So if you hear her run into things, that's what she's doing, running into things. But she likes to come to the studio, so she can run into new things and step on pedals. She loves guitar pedals.
Nice. She likes to change the
Yeah,
sound.
she loves
for the
to
chorus.
Also, it's kind of funny looking at my studio. Notice the two 4K, the 4K and the 3K harmonizers. She will run into those and turn the wheel. So I was in a mix one day and I had just a little nice like layered shift at 101. I just load 101 and it comes this background vocal part and one of the vocals was like 2 octaves up and I was like, what the heck? And she had walked by and ran into the wheel and spun the wheel and raised the pitch, which was pretty awesome. So she helps me on some of my mixes, which
I think Brian Eno might have used to use that same technique.
Yeah,
for finding
maybe.
New sounds
Yeah.
in the studio.
Yeah. I can get out my Oblique Strategies cards and one of them says, let the dog loose.
Right.
But, so my father is my father's he's a machinist, and then my stepfather is who really is, my father sort of he was in banking, but he was really great, and so I have this weird background. Joplin's a small town. I got started hanging out with the band in the early 80s, like 82, right out of high school. And I was in college. I was kind of a nerd kid. I went to electronics school in high school. So I graduated high school with basically 6 credits away from an associate's degree in electrical engineering. And right about that time in 82, that was the big, personal computer days and all that. And I kind of got into that for a while in college. I went to college for a year. And
she's getting ready to go roll the ultra harmonizer there and change the pitch of your voice.
I was working with this band and, man, I'd love to say like, I just loved music so much. But it was just all about, there were no girls in the computer lab, it was like, and back in those days you could drink at 18 in Kansas, which was 5 miles away.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, well, I turned 18. It was like, I want to go see bands. I went and saw bands every weekend and I just really got bit by live music. And so I just started doing live recording. Or not live recording, but I started doing live.
This is like mid.
This is like 84, 83, 84, 85.
Yeah, man, that was like a golden age of
man,
rock
skinny ties and like girls with big hair, not as big as the 90s hair, but like pretty big hair, lots of Aquanet.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as bands too, I mean, this was an era when bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers were first rolling out in vans and driving themselves around the country to play shows, and that's
absolutely. And there was a ton of great music in the Midwest too. I remember when Soul Asylum was a rock band, like a punk rock band, so out of Chicago. It's like, really, and the Replacements. I mean, all those bands in the mid '80s and
REM
were
was super big. Right
REM was super influential. I could go on and on about all those days. I mean, I toured for a long time. I toured for almost 20 years, really.
Wow.
In the grand scheme of it. I've worked with a bunch of people in the live sound world. I'm probably one of the few people who've done both,
Well, I mean, I understand the hesitation to want to reminisce too much about a time in the past, but I think, our listeners, our rock stars here are people who are starting out in their recording career and they're starting out in their path. And sometimes I think it's really insightful for them to realize that these names that you're mentioning are bands that seem too big to be true now, But at that time, they were just like
a lot of them were.
listeners.
Kind of nobody. I mean, I mixed a band. I say I was in a band because I was the fifth member of the band. I mean, I did everything. We all did everything, and it was a 5-way split, which is pretty amazing for the sound guy to get a 5-way, a piece of the band. But for a band that opened a tremendous amount of shows, Columbia, St. Louis, Kansas City area, because the band was amazing, it was really great. And I mean, I remember playing the first show that Sonic Youth ever did in Columbia, Missouri. And, Thurston had his 20 weirdly tuned Mustangs. And I was just so blown away by how great they were. This is like 86, early 80s, 85, 86, something like that. It's a little fuzzy now, but I think it'd be 86, 87, somewhere in there. And just seeing some of these bands early on that were really great. I mean, seeing the Replacements, did a tour with the Replacements.
What was the band that you were with?
It was a band called A Picture Made.
A Picture Made. Okay. And you mentioned St. Louis. So I was actually in St. Louis in that second half of the 80s myself. So I'm guessing you guys were playing Cicero's Basement Bar. And
Cicero's Basement. Absolutely. Most of the stuff that Picture Made played was Cicero's and Mississippi Nights.
Yep. When it was a half size venue.
When it was the side venue. And there's some others. Do you remember Billy Goat Hill? That might have been before. If you were there that was a little earlier.
I started in 86 there, but I do remember going down
86.
and seeing,
yeah, man. I was there in 86 a lot.
Yeah. The Flaming Lips. I saw a show, one of their early
did show
shows.
Flaming Lips in Tulsa once. Yeah. Played in Tulsa a lot. It's a cool town, Tulsa.
Well, so all right, so you were coming up in bands, you were doing lots of sound. I'm guessing you picked up an instrument too.
I worked in a music store in 85, and they had a little 8-track studio as part of this, not really part of the store, but a guy gave lessons next door and he had an 8-track. And so he kind of was like, well, I got some sessions I can't do if you want to do them. There's $20 in it or something, something stupid. And I was like, okay, well, I need to go over there and figure it out. And it was a Tascam 80-8 with the DBX and a Tascam 3 mixer, which is actually still a pretty great deal. And some, 57s and 58s and some AMR PD monitors or something. Yeah. I mean, it's something, And so I did that. I was there for about 4 or 5 months, and I worked there. And then that would have been in 85. And then in 86, I was starting working for Picture Made. And there was another local band in Joplin. There was a studio in Joplin called Massey Studios. And it was owned by a friend of mine named Rick Massey, who I owe the greatest gratitude in the world for. And he knows this. I mean, I've told him over and over. But I mean, I really have to thank him so much because he did something really dumb. I mean, in one sense.
What, he let you engineer?
He let me engineer. I came in, this band wanted to record, but they didn't like the house guy who wasn't exactly Rick. It was another guy, but Rick was kind of the other house guy, and they wanted me to do it. And he said, okay, here's how the console works. They had an Allen Heath Syncon B desk. It was a 40-channel desk, 24 buses, inline. I mean, it was a pretty complicated little piece of machinery for me at that point, coming from the Tascam 3. But yet, I was doing live sound, so I totally got all the busing and routing and all that. And after about 30 minutes, he was like, hey, I think you got it. So, I'll be in the other room.
Yeah, that's
and about 6 o'clock, he came in and he goes, hey, I'm going home. Here's the keys. Come by in the morning. I want to talk to you. I said, okay, cool. I'll bring you your key. He goes, oh, no, it's not my key. It's your key. You're the new engineer. You know more than all of us. I go, I don't know anything. He goes, it doesn't matter. You're better than me. That's all that matters.
That's great.
And I was like, okay. So the next day I came in, we talked, and he offered me a gig in the studio. I think I made $5 an hour. And that was awesome.
Yeah.
That to me at the time was just like, are you kidding? Yay. So, but what I got to do is I got to just go there and teach myself, learn. And the funny thing was I had to learn sort of fast because that weekend, the reason he gave me the keys is that weekend he had a session. And this is really hilarious because the first album I ever did, I did that weekend, and it was a group. I can't say a band. It was not a band. It was a group called the Crusaders for Christ. And they were a Southern gospel quartet with the piano player, straight up down the road Southern gospel, but not a male quartet. It was 2 and 2, 2 men. It was two couples. Piano player, the whitest piano player on the planet, and they wanted to record with the church's drummer, bass player, and guitar player. So we recorded the whole record, and we cut live vocals like in the room. I think I used 451s for vocal mics. I mean, I had no idea what I was doing whatsoever. And then we mixed the record, and I remember like having this, like, we cut to a quarter-inch machine, all Otari. It was a MTR, not an MTR 90. It was a MX70, 1-inch 16 track.
Wow. And
when we had a quarter-inch MTR 12, I think. And I cut the whole record to quarter-inch, and then they gave me the running order. And I was like, but it's not in the same order that's on the tape. Like, I was so, like, I never even thought about, okay, how do I
get the songs rearranged and mixed down?
And they're like, we're going to go to dinner. Can you here's the best part. Can you get us a cassette by the time we get back of it in order? I go, yeah. So then I'm like scrounging around trying to figure out how to do this because I've never done it. And, then I just kind of went, oh, look, there's a huge stack of quarter-inch reels right there. So I just spun each one onto a reel and then pieced it together. And then I realized, oh, hold it. I'm the one responsible for the space between them. So now it's like, now I can, And, it took me 2 hours. But by the time they got back, and then I put the cassette in because there was no such thing as a CD player in 1986. Mm-hmm. And I hit record and did side one on one side of a 45-minute, like a 45-minute cassette or 90-minute cassette, and flipped over the other side, did side B, and they're like, we love it, it's great. Send it off to, what was that company in Springfield, Missouri? There was
Duplication.
Yeah. National Tape and Tape Duplication or something. And they would make the cassettes and the whole deal.
Yeah, and cassette duplication. Well, so first of all, for our listeners, hopefully you do know what a cassette is and you've seen them. They're still around. They're probably making a resurgence.
Oh, it's the
somewhere.
hipster thing. Everybody knows what cassette is.
So when you need to duplicate cassettes, they would have these giant machines, and they'd pop your cassette into. Well, you might do it from a quarter-inch reel too.
Yeah, it's in a quarter-inch reel.
A lot of times they do it from a cassette too.
Yep.
So they pop it in, and then there's just like 50 cassettes rolling, on the surface of this machine, and
at
just do
5
them all
to 10 times regular
speed.
speed.
They speed them way up.
Yep.
So it's somewhere when you were assembling these mixes in a new order, did you think to yourself, geez, I really feel like I'm mastering this process? And
I never had no idea what. No, I
Not
didn't.
realizing that you were in fact mastering.
Just deer in the headlights, figuring it out. And the funny thing was, I worked for Rick until 1990, so that would have been 86. And actually, when A Picture Made broke up in 88, I went to work for him full time, and I worked for him. I repaired guitar amps for his father, who had a music store next door, Massey Music next door. Mm-hmm. And I fixed a lot of PVs, a lot of Fenders, a lot of that kind of, I repaired stuff. My electrical engineering worked out for me. And then Rick had a degree, so he was a little smarter than me on some stuff, and he would help me through some of that stuff. But I had to teach myself aligning machines, aligning everything, maintenance, studio maintenance, how to, everything. I had to teach myself everything. First thing I did was they had drums in a drum booth, and they had maxi pads on all the toms, and all the toms had no bottom heads.
Just like taped onto the top.
Taped onto them. And the first thing I did was go next door to the music store, get a bunch of drum heads and put the bottom heads on and tune the drums. And I remember Rick came in, he's like, what are you doing?
It's like, what'd you do? I'm
trying to make these drums sound good. And he's like, oh, you'll have a real hard time with those with those bottom heads. And I go, oh, well, what do you mean? I'm like, boom, boom. And he's like, oh, okay.
Like you figured out how to make them sound
yeah.
Like they
and
actually sound like
it was just funny.
Now.
It was, it was a different way of doing. It was a different way of thinking. I think. I just don't think they had thought. I think at the time it was like, I've got to get this session. It's this amount of time, and I've got this other. I run another business. He ran another business, so the studio wasn't really like this thing that made him money. It was just, oh, it's this thing I bought, and now I thought it'd make money, but now it's a lot of work for me. And then when suddenly I was there, he was like, oh, that's not a lot of work for me anymore. So go for it. Do whatever you want to do. And it was great. I mean, I didn't make any records there that anybody would know or have ever heard or know anything about. But
well, it's interesting to hear you talk about coming in and making changes to it and just kind of doing your thing, So, because again, our listeners are going to love hearing stories about stuff in the past, but of course they're chomping at the bit for wanting to learn how to do something now. And to hear that story, what strikes me is, you've got somebody who's a generation above you who owns the place and literally probably comes from.
It's actually funny. He's not. He really wasn't a generation above me.
Oh, he wasn't.
He's about 5 years older than me.
Okay.
But the generation above me, story is coming.
All right. Well, I guess what I wanted to take away from your story is that you came in and you made a change to things. And it's just a reminder to, people starting out that it's the things that you're going to do that are going to define what happens next in music.
I think you have to know. I think the thing was for me is that I understood that he didn't know any more than I did. So, and he, by his own admission, said that. So anything I did was uncharted waters for both of us. It was both of us learning how, if I would have designed the studio and I didn't, there were a million things I wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
The right-hand side of the studio was in a corner, a triangular corner that's, what is it when you have a triangle or an angle that's less than 45?
Oh, acute. Right?
Acute. It was an acute angle. And they had put kind of an indoor-outdoor carpet on the wall, and about every 16 inches where the studs were, they'd done a pine sort of strip.
Yeah.
Like a half-inch strip of pine.
Like a furring
strip.
strip.
A furring strip, exactly. The entire right side of the studio was a built-in comb filter. It was just, I could look at it and go, I know that doesn't work at all. And it's in a corner. It's in a less than 45 corner. It's like, and we had a set of the monitors were EV Century 100s, which actually sounded pretty good. But the room had been tuned with an analyzer, and the right side EQ was a comb filter, and the left side was like just a little bit of like tone. And I would just look at that and be like, there's no way that this can translate.
Right.
Ever. And so then it was like, okay, well, let me try some small speakers. And at the time, I don't think I was smart enough to get the fact that that's a whole nother ball of wax, the small speaker conundrum,
Yeah.
So, I bought some Oratones and I couldn't make heads or tails of that. And it was because I was doing live sound and I was used to it being big.
Right.
So the Century 100s would actually get big in the room. As the big speaker.
And it would sound familiar to you.
It would sound familiar, and it was all above me. I wasn't at that point in a point where I could fly a PA, flying a PA meant we put it on the stage. We flew it above the ground, on the stage. But, so it was familiar. But,
can you explain what Oratones are for our listeners?
Yeah, Oratone is a little cube, with a 4-inch speaker, I think, and they were really made for checking mono mixes from best that I remember back in the day. That was kind of what I was told later on, that people bought them to put them in the center of your speaker and you hit the mono button and switch to those. And that's what it sounded like on the radio.
On the radio.
And
or
so
like on
it's
your
like,
TV
it's like
speaker,
if people have NS10s because they mix on them because they sound bad, Oratone is even one step worse bad than that. I don't use NS10s because they sound bad. I use NS10s because they sound cool. If you mod them a little bit like I have, Lidge can see what I've done. Yeah, you put the right amplifier on them, they're absolutely great. They'll translate into every world. But Oratones will do the same thing. It's all about your reference. Doesn't matter what the speaker is. If you have a speaker that you understand what music sounds like and you play it back, I mean, it could be anything. It could be a boombox. It could be, I mean, I have a set of ATC 25s, very expensive set of speakers. They sound amazing. Do they always sound like what I want? Nope. But do they sound really great? Yes. Are they my reference? They're not my reference. They're actually my alternate reference. I use Perec Studio 100s. Those are my reference. I know what everything sounds like on them. I have a set at my house. I have a set in a road case I take with me anywhere I go anywhere. And I have a set in my B room, and I have a set here on the studio.
And the important thing is that you know what they sound like.
I know what they sound like. You put them on the Bryson 4B, I know exactly what they sound like.
So what's a today equivalent of an Oratone for people who are making records
I think there's
today?
Avantones. I think is that the name of the company?
Yeah, Avantone is a company that makes an Oratone.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at too is to suggest that using the Oratone.
NS10s became the de facto Oratone replacement.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. I guess what I was getting at is we're trying to segue a little bit to listening to an iPhone speaker or laptop speakers
that's
and
a whole nother
headphones and that kind of stuff.
I mean, MacBook speakers, yeah. I or an iPhone speaker, either one of those are,
do you find those useful?
Sometimes.
Do you hate them?
It's not that I hate them. It's that I understand what they are, I use Source Live here. So a lot of people use Stream. No,
Nicecast.
Nicecast. Yeah, thank you. I was trying to get that in my head. But I like Source Live because I can ramp it up. I mean, I could Source Live to 1 million people if I wanted to,
right? Just
by buying some minutes, and because it's buffered through Source Elements server. It's all through their stuff.
And this is a way to stream.
This is a way to stream, and they have an iPhone app. And so, I have many times put a mix up on the desk, playing back, put it on my phone, streamed it, put it on my phone, walked from in here out to my car, turned on my car, set the Bluetooth, and sat and listened to it streaming in my car. So that I know what it sounds like, what a 128 kilobit or 192 for me. That's what I set it at. 192 kilobit MP3 sounds like streamed over the air, done it a bunch, but do I like it? No, not really.
But sometimes you might respond to it. You might make changes in a mix based on that.
I have definitely made changes to a mix based on the sound of the mono iPhone speaker. So, yeah.
All right. Here's a question. How in the world do you get to hear a bass on a mono iPhone speaker?
Well, turn it off.
Turn the bass off?
Yeah. Turn the bass off and turn it back on. You'll hear
it. Right on.
I have a couple things about the bass. First of all, I work mostly in my own room, so I kind of know it pretty well. But if I go elsewhere, I just will listen to the mix at the lowest possible volume that I can possibly get the speaker to go. And then I'll turn the bass off and turn it back on. Turn the bass off, turn it back on. And as long as I can hear it coming and going, it's loud enough. If when I take it out, what I'm hearing is radically different, it's too loud. But I mix pretty bass heavy, kick and bass, but can it ever be too loud, really?
I don't know.
But you know what I mean? But
can it be too fun?
Can it be too fun? That's exactly right. I don't want to say speak names, but I had I should, but I'm not going to. A&R guy asked me in a mix if I could make the mix. He was sitting in the room with me. If I could make it bounce more. And I said, well, okay, cool. What do you suggest I do to make it do that?
It's good thinking.
And he said, and I go, turn the bass up? He goes, yeah, let's try that. So I added 0.2 of a dB of bass. I go, well, what do you think of that? He goes, can I hear without it? I, went back one on the mix while it's playing. I was in flying faders. I go back one. He's like, yeah. I go, you want to hear it with it? He goes, yeah. He goes, yeah, man, it bounces a little more. I was like, okay. And then knowing what he really wanted, I took, like a half a dB or a quarter of a dB of threshold off the tubas. Because that's really what he wanted.
Right. He just wanted it to open up the compression.
He just wanted it to just open up a bit.
Just speak.
And then a couple of minutes later, he's like, yeah, man, that's way better. So, the funny thing is that I knew what he wanted, and what he wanted was valid to a point, but I just wanted to know if he knew what he wanted.
Yeah.
And then when he didn't, I gave him something that he could take away saying, I haven't turned the bass up because it wasn't really bouncing, wasn't dancing enough.
Right.
So now he's proud of it, and he thinks I'm a super cool guy for letting him.
You gave him a great experience.
I gave him a good experience.
It's part of what we do.
That's part of what we do.
And, if you're working with clients, I always say you're either trying to help them accomplish their business goals, if they've really got something and a record is a financial investment for them, or you're helping them experience a wonderful form of creative tourism.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Creative tourism is
you're just trying to give them a great experience.
Yeah.
They're here to enjoy the crap out of making music and making a record, and sometimes it's our job to help them do that.
Yep.
Well, so we haven't really talked about it.
Let me talk one more. Let me talk one little more thing. When I left Joplin, I left Joplin in 1990, and I went to work in Springfield, Missouri. And I went to work in Springfield, Missouri for one reason and one reason only, and that was Lou Whitney, the man Lou Whitney, the legend Lou Whitney. Lou Whitney is probably one of the greatest unsung heroes in American roots music. He passed away last year in October. I say over and over again that he was my mentor. He never thought that at all. He just thought we hung out, but he taught me a lot of things about how to deal with people, how to be funny, how to make people laugh. There's a lot of people that I know who knew who he was, and the world is not a better place because he's gone, but it was a much better place when he was here. And he gave me a job in Springfield after about a year of working up there in a bar. And he just basically did the same thing. He gave me the keys and let me make records in there with local bands. And I it's funny. I said once in an interview that he paid me $10 an hour, and then he actually wrote me. He said, no, that would have been nice, but I paid you $7. And I was like, really? He's like, yeah, I paid you $7. I was like, oh, okay. Well, he's like, yeah, it wasn't as altruistic. I wasn't as altruistic as you believe.
I remember my first $7 an hour job. I thought it was great.
It was great, man. And the cool thing was that he was just the best, man. He gave me some of my favorite sayings in the whole world, and how to deal with sessions and how to deal with people. And I use my favorite quote of his was, "One man's boy howdy's another man's far out." And basically I said, I used that quote a lot. This was a couple of years ago. And he said, "Oh, well, I updated it, for the new millennium." And I said, "Oh, really?" He goes, "Yeah, now it's one man's WTF, it's another man's OMG." And I go, "Oh, well, that makes complete sense."
Yeah.
He's just talking about how, some people love the Beach Boys and some people love Megadeth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's
the people who love Megadeth probably are not Beach Boys fans.
That segues to a question I wanted to ask anyway, which you may have just answered, which was, what's some of the best advice you remember anybody giving you coming up in recording and music?
Become a lawyer.
Become a lawyer.
Go into
Your own
law.
lawyer?
Yeah, go into law. Quit this. What's the best advice? Wow, that's a tough one.
Or if you wanted to turn around and just share some good advice to somebody who's starting out.
Well, okay, here's the best advice I can give, and it's and that is, you have to be fearless to make it in this business. If you are a person who is afraid of change, or you're afraid of failing, or you're afraid of losing your house, which is actually, what everybody does. If you're afraid of all that stuff, you're normal. Yeah. But if you're afraid of it and you act upon it because you're afraid, then you are not going to last. When I lived in Joplin, first of all, my parents lived there. At the time, my grandparents were still alive. They lived there. My brothers were there. I lived in a house with 2 girls. It was a beautiful, cool old house. It was awesome. We were all roommates and cool. We hung out. We went to bars. We had a lot of fun. Joplin's 40,000 people. There's not a lot going on there, but there was a little bit of a music scene happening. There were some cool bands there, and I worked at a studio that I had the keys to. I could do whatever I wanted. I made $5 an hour, dude. $5 an hour. We're talking about 1989 here. And I got this offer to move to Springfield to work in a club for a guy who basically was a drug dealer. That's how he made his money. Mm-hmm. Is he sold cocaine and so had live bands play and then want to pay them in cocaine, which is because it was the 80s.
Right.
And I went to work there and I worked for him for a year. I worked 11 in the morning until 4 a.m. every day.
Wow.
And I was the production manager for the venue. So I did monitors, I did front of house, I did lights, I climbed on the ladders, I focused lights, I changed gels, I programmed the lights, had a little leprechaun thing or whatever with the pins and he had a PA company. I went out and did gigs for him. It was a complete, can I say bullshit? It's a complete bullshit. I put a little red
E next to the podcast.
Bullshit gig. But you know what? I learned a lot. I learned about working for people who, I don't want to work for.
Yeah.
And all the time I kept trying my best to figure out a way to get in with Lou Whitney. And you know what happened is Lou came over, his band played, and then this other band played that he was producing, and he came in to listen and he said, "You're pretty good. You should come out to the studio sometime. Do you work?" I go, "Yeah, I work at the studio in Joplin." He goes, we'd talked about this before, but him and I, and he's like, "Oh yeah, come out." And then I had a little band, terrible band actually, but kind of good, from Columbia, Missouri. That was sort of a ska band. They had horns and they smoked mountains of pot, and they wanted to make a record, and I did this record, and Lou was like, "Wow, this is really great. So here's the keys. Come." And about that time, the gig at the club I was working at sucked, and I quit. So my point is that I left my hometown where I, lived with 2 girls. I had a gig at a studio. I moved into a horrible situation. I didn't know anybody in Springfield. I didn't have a place to live. I just found a situation where, again, I was living with 2 girls. I found a situation that, after living in my van for about 4, 5, 6 off and on weeks, living in my van and driving back to Missouri, and just driving back to Joplin and staying in a motel and just all that stuff.
Did it have shag carpet on the walls?
Yeah, it did. My van absolutely did. It was the rapiest van I've ever seen. I actually went to pick up a girl for a date one time. This is back in the late 80s. And I pulled up out front. I came up to get her. Her dad opened the door and said, "Is that your car?" And I said, "Yes." And he closed the door.
Wow.
And a few minutes later, she came out with the keys and said, "We're going in my car. We're going in my dad's car." That's kind of funny.
Great. As a dad, I can appreciate that.
Yeah, you can appreciate that. Yeah, I can too, totally. Yeah, here this guy shows up, wheels up in the band van with the shag carpets and
8-track cassette player.
It did not have an 8-track. It had a cassette, but not an 8-track. Had a nice stereo in it. Alpine, it was cool.
So for our listeners, if you don't know what an 8-track cassette is, that's like a giant boxy cassette that you just shove into the hole like an Atari cartridge. You might not know what an
endless
Atari
loop.
Cartridge is either.
You should just look it up. It's an endless loop.
And you can't even tell what you're going to listen to. You sort of have no control over the music.
It's great. It's like 22 minutes or something like that, or 18 minutes or 15 or something. It's not even like a full side of an album. So it'd be probably 15 minutes of tape, and it would change tracks.
That's awesome.
1/4-inch tape, 8 tracks of 1/4-inch tape.
Hi, I hope you are enjoying hearing from today's featured rock star. We are just about to head into the jam session, and I want to let you know that all the cool stuff we talk about will all be available in the show notes for this episode. If you would like me to send it directly to you, all you need to do is text JAM SESSION to 33444, and I'll send you free content, including the show notes. Again, that's jam session to 33444, and I'll send you free content, including the show notes. Cheers. All right, I'm going to jump into some feel-good questions.
Let's do it.
So tell us a time where you felt like you hit a real point of failure, something where you just felt like you're about to give up or something, and it turned out to be a great learning experience for you. I mean, almost your description of moving to Springfield would be that.
The thing is that I moved to Springfield. I worked for this club for a year. It was horrible. And then I worked for Lou for 2 years. And in that period of time, the next, I've told people this a lot. I've made these jumps. I did a show with Tammy Wynette. I just brought some monitors to them. A year later, I got a call from the production manager for Tammy and said, hey, you want to come to Nashville and work for Tammy Wynette? And I said, I don't know why I'd want to do that, but let me think about it. How much did it pay? And he told me, and I was like, oh, Now, looking back on it, it wasn't a lot of money, really. I mean, in the grand scheme of it. So I did it. I jumped. And I moved. I didn't move to Nashville. I took the gig. And I actually spent a year driving back and forth from Nashville to Springfield. Wow. But the thing but the deal is that, Nashville, like the country music world, she would go out on Thursday, come back on Sunday, or come back on Monday, and then I would just drive back home. It was easy. I could be at home for 4 days and come back. It was a weekend warrior gig. But after about a year of that, I had to, the front of house engineer quit, production manager quit. I took his job and I had to move to Nashville as part of the deal. And I moved here. I didn't know anybody and I just jumped in. I also did my first Nashville session about a year after that. And it was at some studio in a building they just tore down yesterday over there by the sub stop. It was kind of that next to Cropper's old place up in the upstairs, and I think it was Monty Powell's place or something. I don't know what the deal was. And it was a disaster. I mean, I had no idea what these people were wanting or doing. I was used to sort of doing everything on my own schedule, and then the whole band showed up and wanted, 10 minutes after they showed up a downbeat. And, so in some ways that was an interesting failure, but that didn't really mean anything. I've been very lucky in that I don't have anything I can just point at and say, this was a disaster.
Yeah.
A complete disaster. I thought moving to Nashville and working for Tammy Wynette was a disaster to my studio career because I couldn't get a gig here if I wanted to. I was 28 years old and everybody wanted me to be an intern. I couldn't quit a paying gig to be an intern, so I just had to kind of put it on hold for a while. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you were already familiar with failures. Like you didn't view failures as failures by this point. You'd had enough experience.
I didn't. Yeah, I mean,
like you you knew how to deal with fear. You knew how to.
It's not really. Yeah, it wasn't really failures. It's more about forward. Like, okay, I'm afraid of moving to Nashville because I don't know anybody, but I'm just going to do it and see what happens.
Yeah.
And I didn't know anybody in Springfield. I didn't know anybody in Nashville. I didn't know anything about Nashville. I didn't know anything about the business of Nashville. But I knew that I knew what I could do, and I just knew time would come when it would show.
Yeah. Now, were you even a fan of country music at that point? Was that like in your wheelhouse?
I was a fan of Tammy. I was a fan of all the, Merle, Waylon, I was friend. I loved all that.
Yeah.
I mean, country music minus a couple bright shining stars, sucks. I just did Chris Stapleton's record and it's brilliant.
Yeah.
And he is brilliant. And, I'm not saying it's brilliant because I did it. I'm saying it's brilliant because he's an amazing singer and songwriter, and it's just a brilliant record.
Yeah.
Sturgill's amazing. He's awesome. He's a great guy. I love that guy. And he's a good, they're both good people.
Yeah.
Pretty much everything else out there, and minus a couple people that maybe know what they're doing, is complete and utter fucking bullshit. It is the worst shit I've ever heard.
Well, that's tough, man. So I definitely know you for working with a lot of artists that like to push the boundaries and really get to the heart of what makes something great. You want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, Sturgill Simpson, you've worked with Jack.
I did
Jack
Sturgill's
White.
first record, and it's funny. He asked me to mix Meta Modern, and I was actually in the middle of another project, another Dave Cobb record at that point. And by the time he asked me about it, it was over New Year's. It was around New Year's. And he sent me a text like, "Hey, I got this record. Do you think you have time? It probably just take a couple days." And I wrote back and I said, "Yeah, man, I'd love to do it. I can do it like on January 12th. And he's like, "Oh, we already mixed it." I was like, "Oh, hell." And that's basically the deal. They just mixed it in one afternoon. They did, wow. Dave did it. It's the more or less, Dave did it. So I didn't do the second one, but, obviously, I spent 8 years, right at about 8 years now, working with Jack White, and that's been a incredibly eye-opening thing because, he's pretty amazing. I mean, he's probably the most talented person I've ever been around.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite drummers ever.
That's great.
He's my favorite keyboard player, organist, and piano and organ. He's unbelievable. And he taught all that. I mean, he just did it himself. He's the easiest artist I've ever had to get a guitar sound for. It doesn't matter what amp he plays. It doesn't matter what guitar. It doesn't matter how old the strings are. It doesn't matter what microphone you put in front of it. It sounds just like him.
That's great.
And, it's all in his hands. Amazing vocalist. What he does with his voice, it just freaks me out sometimes. And, I have to, now I didn't, in the last 2 years, I haven't worked with him as much as I did before, partially because he's been out on the road and working in between, popping in and out off the road. Mm-hmm. But he's been working with my assistant, Josh Smith, who used to be my assistant, now definitely is working for him and working for him as an engineer. Yeah, Josh, of course.
Another bearded gentleman.
The other beardo in that team. And, Josh is doing a great job. And he's learned well. I mean, he's learned how to work with him. I'm not bummed out about it. I'm happy for Josh. Jack wants to work when Jack wants to work.
Yeah.
He called me last year in August and was like, "Hey, I got this record I want to try to finish. Are you available today?" I was like, "I'm available in September, not today," And so my schedule and the fact that I'm not independently wealthy leads to often me missing working with Jack.
Yeah.
Because Jack wants to work when Jack can work.
Yeah, sure.
And he's really super cool about it. He doesn't ever hold anything against you if you can't work. He's called me before, "Hey man, can you work tomorrow?" I'm like, tomorrow is the 4th of July and I got family in town. And, "Oh, it is?" You know what I mean? Like, he just wants to, I've got a day off. Why do I have a day off? "Oh, it's the 4th of July. So, oh, okay. I mean but sometimes that happens. And Josh has been great because Josh has been working for him on the road and it's, they've done good work.
What's a takeaway if you were going to sort of give a tip or an advice about the process of recording that you learned from that experience working with Jack or that Josh is learning?
Learn to be fast.
Mm-hmm.
See, I think that's like let me postulate. Let me throw out an idea here. First of all, I think anybody learning this business should do live sound. They should do live sound. They should do live sound while they're recording. And the reason being is that live sound teaches you a bunch of things. One, it teaches you that, you've got to put a mix together in a very, very, very short period of time. Right. And you don't have all day to sort it out. You've got one song to do. Like I mixed Jars of Clay for years on the road, in the late 90s and early 2000s. And we would go into festivals having 48 inputs from the stage. And I would walk up to a desk and I had to have here, we're on a Soundcraft. Okay, great. All right, cool. All right, play. Got one song, to put a 48 channel mix together. One song.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise, man, you're going to lose people. You've got to kill. It's not just like, oh, I'm putting together an acceptable mix. You have to kill.
Yeah.
And so the deal with Jack doesn't, I mean, I never did a session with him ever where we got sounds. Getting sounds is the band learning this. I mean, you know, okay, cool. Here's this. I got this riff. Can you play this on the bass? And can you play this on the drums? And cool. All right, cool. You ready in there, Vance?
Yeah.
Like, that is.
It's not like you wait your turn.
No. No. It's just, we just go.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then once they're recording, you can't change anything. Or if you do, it's got to be these minute, tiny little changes because, okay, cool. Well, I love the first take intro, and then let's get the first take chorus. Let's get the second take, second chorus and verse, and cut all that together.
Do you have a process for making adjustments once things get rolling?
No, I just try to sneak things in when they're not playing.
Yeah, I like to keep a scratch pad next to me, and I'll just not change it during a take.
I don't even have time to write stuff down. That's Josh's job. I'll just yell at him. That was his job. Like, you know, like, we got to do this on the next change or whatever, you know, like run out there while they're recording and move this mic, you know, like sometimes you just have to do that stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, it's all on tape, 8-track.
That's right. It's all on 8-track tape.
Yeah. So, you know, on tape, there's no undo. There's only redo.
Yes. Yeah.
And when you're on 2-inch 8-track at 7.5, everything is different. The punch in is different. You have to go in before the downbeat and you have to come out before the downbeat.
Yeah. I remember working with Steve Albini. He made a great comment about cutting to tape too. And people were talking about, you know, the Pro Tools mentality of keeping all these takes and everything. And his attitude was sort of like, well, if that one's not good enough and you're going to do it again, why are we keeping that one, you know?
Yeah.
Why not just keep the one that you're going to listen to?
Richard Dodd, he's the one who said there is, you know, on tape, there's no undo, just redo. And I have recorded over things that were great working with Jack, and he's never been angry. It's like, cool, we'll just get something better.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, as long as you're, you know, as long as that's the mentality and it's not, you know, you're fired. I mean, there's no need for that ever. I know people in this business who treat people, assistants and other people, horribly.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest with you, there's no reason for that ever. You know, I'm in this seat because I've spent years doing this. And the last thing I need to do is to make myself feel more important by yelling at somebody who's working for me, or maybe an intern who's here for free, you know, like or you know, just learning. They don't need me to be an asshole to them, you know. I mean, and the same thing with bands. I mean, you know, like I'm doing a lot of production these days. There's no need for me to go yell at the band because they're being dicks. They know they're being dicks when they're being dicks, you know. Now, I can go say, hey, look, here's the deal. You can be a dick, but in the end, I'm the one who has the final say-so.
I have the mute button.
Yeah, because you have hired me to produce, and I'm going to produce this track, and I'm going to produce it with you or without you. So you can be a dick about this part, but look, let's just work through it. And most of the time, you know, that kind of diffuses the situation and things are cool, but there's no reason for anybody. It's like recording guys talking down about the live sound guys. Let me tell you, man, like, you think you've got it rough. I sit here in my studio in the air conditioning, you know, all day in front of the same speakers and the same desk and the same everything. I tell you what, why don't we just take all this stuff and let's just load it into a really shitty sounding room every other day. Put it in a truck every night, load it out every night, you know, and at any given point in time in the studio, like, I've never been in a studio situation where I've ever thought my life is in danger. I've never thought my life was ever in danger. I've stood underneath 70,000 pounds of PA and watched the ceiling bend when the PA stops when you fly it up and down. And watch the ceiling bending and this PA bouncing. And you're standing there going, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to put 400 people under this PA that I just flew. and it's my responsibility. And
That's
people could die. We've seen it.
Investing in your music.
We've seen it. The horrible thing that happened in Iowa, the Lady Antebellum thing. Nobody did anything wrong there. I mean, they're going to make somebody the scapegoat. But basically, what happened was nature. A big storm came with winds they didn't expect. It hit that top sideways, and the PA pulled the PA, turned into a sail, and it pulled the PA down onto people and killed them. So if you think you're a badass and you work in a studio and you're thinking the live sound guys are a bunch of pussies, let me tell you, man, you don't even know what you're talking about. Those guys work hard. I loaded in. The last tour I did was the last real tour I did. I did do some dates with Jack with the Dead Weather. That wasn't real. I mean, it was a real tour, but I was just, I would walk in with my, I'd push some gear in, and
you didn't even have to wear the flashlight.
Oh no, I had to wear the suit. I had to wear the whole suit. But the last real tour I did, was a 7-truck Christmas tour. Well, no, that's not really true. The last big tour, 7-truck Christmas tour. I loaded in every morning at 7:30, and I got in bed every night at 2.
Wow.
And we did 23 shows in 26 days.
That's hard work, man.
That's hard work. It's hard work, and it's not for the faint of heart. Because literally you can kill people or be killed.
I do the hay bale gig every year at Bonnaroo, and I have always considered that hard work, but it's not even hard work compared to what you just described.
No, I mean my friends who are mixing and out there pushing cables and pulling cables, it's hard work. It's hard work. It's hard work for the audience. I used to say that live sound is the best gig in the world if it wasn't for the band and the audience. If you could just load in, set up, tune the PA, go to lunch, come back, put it all in the truck, it would be the best gig ever.
What about the club owner? Doesn't he go in with the, she go in with the?
It's a whole nother, exactly.
Well, so, all right. Well, so I think we're at a point where we may have to wrap up here, but the last question.
I wish we talked about something important.
Something that I always would like to ask you is, this idea again for our rock stars, for our listeners starting out, of if they're dropped in, or if you were dropped into a strange city and you were going to start out in recording, I might kind of scratch my usual question. I'm going to put it back towards what your own advice, which is getting a gig in live sound. What advice would you have for somebody who's, they're willing to take on this fear factor of moving to a new strange city and they want to start out and they love your suggestion of getting a gig in live sound? What's the best way to start? How do you show up as somebody who doesn't know anybody yet?
I think that there's two things. First of all, if you want you want to work in a studio, right? Or not want to work in a studio, you want to record. First thing you need to do is you need to find some way to purchase some way of recording. All right. So that could be a laptop and an interface. It could be well, that's probably the first route, a laptop and an interface. I tell people all the time to try to find a portacassette or a Tascam 388, which is a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel, because basically, that kind of vibe, like try to find one of those.
The portacassette is the 4-track
cassette. Yeah. Porta Studio. That's the first thing.
Not a porta potty, guys.
Not a porta potty. That's completely different. But a laptop and interface is a good first place. Find that first. Then go find a band that you're willing to do whatever it takes to help them out. And that means cart their gear around, do live sound for them, record demos in your basement. Get yourself 4 good microphones. You can pretty much 4 or 5 good microphones. You can pretty much record a band. I mean, you can put a mic in front of the kick drum, a mic over the top of the drums, and that's a drum sound. Put a mic a couple feet in front of the bass and one of the guitars, and there's one of your bass, guitar, and drums. Is it like what I'm doing here every day and what you're doing every day? No, but that's what I started with. I had a portacassette.
I'm trying to get back there every
Porta Studio. Yeah. Well, the funny thing is I think we all are, we all are to some degree. All this technology kind of fucks everything up. Yeah. Can I say that?
Sure.
Can I say? I guess I did already.
You just did. That's all right.
parental advisory suggested.
We're making Tipper Core very happy.
Yeah. Poor old Tipper. So first of all, do that. And then do whatever it takes to, let me rephrase it. Do whatever it takes as long as it doesn't, go against your integrity. As long as you can keep your integrity, in other words, you don't have to sleep with the band to be in a,
don't go find, don't go offer your services to Gigi Allen, for example.
Yeah. I saw a Gigi Allen show, man. Let me tell you, I came really close to getting the poo thrown at me. But that's a whole nother story a long time ago. But
so that's a great advice. I mean, if you're going to start out, maybe show up in some town, find a band you like, see if they'll let you sleep on their couch, bring your laptop and your 4 mics.
Yeah, man.
Do live
or
sound
whatever.
for 'em.
Yeah, or whatever. And it doesn't matter. I mean, if you have a laptop and you have 4 mics, you can record a band and then you can use those 4 mics to do overdubs on said band. The other thing is, don't let the technology get in the way of the creativity, because now with Pro Tools, you have unlimited undos and all that sort of shit and tracks and all, I have a rule in a way on productions that I do to this day. And that is, it has to fit. My entire record has to fit inside of 32 tracks. I have to do it in 32 tracks. Now, it used to be we'd do 24 tracks. 24 tracks, great. Do 24 tracks. But I mean, I made 2 Dead Weather records and 1.5 Jack White records on 8 tracks. So, the Beatles did 4 tracks. So, I mean,
Dark Side of the Moon.
Dark Side of the Moon, 16 tracks. Now, were there techniques that were used? I'm working on a record right now, just Tyler Bryant, the Shakedown record. Last night we did 12 or 15 or 16 big stacked vocal tracks. But at the end of it, I printed a 2 mix of it.
Yeah.
I bounced that to a stereo pair because I don't want to see all those tracks. And I want to make all those decisions. Don't be afraid to make decisions. That's the number one thing I say to anybody who's starting out. Don't be afraid to make decisions. Does that reverb sound cool on that guitar? Print it. Be done with it. Make a decision.
Yeah.
Because now, I can't tell you, and Lidge, I know you know this because you do this too, how many times I get records from people that are, like I would say, produced by somebody and completely unproduced by nobody. Right. Like, okay, I just got one the other day that had every guitar track was 4 tracks. There was a mic on 2 different amps, a room mic, and a mic behind the guitar amp. Now, I got to be honest with you. When you put all of those together, it made a pretty good sound. But not that good. Like, the first track sounded pretty great. So what did I do? I turned the other 3 off. Make a decision.
Yeah.
Put some thought in what you're doing and make it so that if you are not the person mixing it, when the person that's mixing it gets it, they don't go, what the fuck is all this shit?
Yeah. I definitely didn't always know better. I was also that guy showing up with four tracks for every guitar overdub when we took a record to be mixed by Tom Lord Alge, and the first thing he did was put it up on the console.
know that. I think I know that record, Lidge.
You might, and he and he flipped phase on a couple of things, and it turned out that like half the tracks were the same track in mono, just out of phase anyway, so he just discarded them.
Yeah,
it was great.
The funny thing is about that is we all learn these lessons, and the thing is, like, Pro Tools. They're weed eating outside of my house right now. That's kind of outside the studio. I mean, it's kind of funny. I don't know if you guys heard that. That wasn't me. That wasn't me. All right. That was a weed eater.
It wasn't Maddie.
Yeah, it wasn't Maddie. No. If it was, this recording would be over. We'd be out of here. This makes me laugh.
Chopping up the reels of tape.
Yeah. We've all had Pro Tools and we've used it for so long now that, we know that we have all this stuff. But I mean, I remember getting Pro Tools for the first time and like the D24 card and being like, I can do 64 tracks and I can bounce and nothing, and the quality goes, and having 24 drum tracks. Like, yes. And then later being like, I don't remember all these.
No.
Hold it. What is this? Oh, that's the can. I put a mic inside a tin can. Oh, I thought that was a cool sound. No, it's stupid.
Well, there was I was just reading on Facebook recently on, I think it was somebody asking a question on David Glenn recording on David Glenn's site. And they were asking about getting a new rig, and they got this new computer and they got an interface and everything, but it only had 64 tracks. And would that be okay? Is that enough? It's just like, wow, amazing,
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Every now and then a record comes to me that has a lot of tracks, and I go, this has a lot of tracks because it's awesome. I mixed a record a couple years ago that I think is maybe the favorite thing I've ever mixed, ever. It's a band from Holland called De Staat, and they made this record called Icon, the letter I and con, Icon. Uh-huh. And it is amazing. And, there was one song that had 45 drum tracks. But those 45 drum tracks were 4 completely different drum sets doing 4 completely different things in different parts of the song. So it was smart. Yeah. It was so smart. And there's a lot of vocal tracks, but all the vocal tracks were smart. And so when I was putting it up, I only had 32 channel desk at the time. So it was like, okay, well, this one's 94 tracks. I can play back these 96K tracks. I can play back 96 tracks. Well, this one's 94, so it's like, okay, I have to combine some stuff. I had to bounce some things. I had to, because
even more than one lauda.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but in the end, it's just a brilliant piece of work because the producer, Tor Florim, he was genius and it was so smart. So sometimes those come to you and you go, oh, it's got a ton of tracks. Wow, it sounds great. Yeah. By the same token, I mixed a track here earlier this year that was 186 88 2 tracks. I have an HDX system. I had to go borrow a card just to open the session to try to mix it. 186 tracks. And of the 186 tracks, there were 11 stereo kick drum tracks. And of the 11 stereo kick drum tracks, 4 of them were identical. They were the same track, just copied and pasted to make the kick drum louder. So it's like, I can look at both sides of this and be like, okay, well, there were 32 tracks of glitches and sweeps, which I combined into one stereo track.
Well, you can still record an entire orchestra with one SM57.
Absolutely.
And that didn't limit how many instruments you got down on the record. It just, you don't need an orchestra's worth of individual tracks.
So, I guess my advice is make decisions. Don't, here's my biggest advice to young kids, young people in this business starting out is just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah. Well, maybe at the beginning you should try it.
Well, you should try it and learn that it's not, don't do it. But by the same token, do whatever it takes to make it work. I mean, whatever it takes. If you need 100 tracks to make your record, okay, cool. Do it. Just make sure it works.
Yeah. Let that be the bold decision.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if it takes that much, okay, fine. Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You got it, man.
For being on the show on
you got
Recording Studio Rockstars with me, Vance.
Hit me up on Twitter. I'm on the Twitter Vance a lot, at Vance a lot, VanceALOT. And I'm not on Instagram. That's a hashtag, by the way. Vance is not on Instagram. I'm sure I will be, but whatever. But I don't have time. I don't even have time for Twitter. But hit me up.
And what if people want to check out the studio and learn more about the
studio? If people want to check out the studio, that at the moment we moved a year ago, and Mitch and we're not a commercial entity. People can't just walk in and book the studio. So having a website for the studio is sort of like, putting up a billboard for a business that's not in business. But we have a website. It was 9 years ago when I first moved into Sputnik. Literally the week I moved in 9 years ago, Mitch had a photographer there, and she came over and took some pictures and they put together a little website. A friend of ours did. And we wanted it just to be, okay, here's what it looks like. Well, of course, that changed radically over the years. And now, now it's that building, we're not even in that building, but we've kind of been sort of lazy. We've been building studios instead of building websites. So don't really go to the website. It doesn't, there isn't anything on there that is even close to what means anything. My partner, Mitch Dang, you can go to his site. And then I have a website that is absolutely nothing. It's a phone number and an email. And that'll be changing at some point here soon. But go down the normal routes, go to allmusic.com and look at the credits. And those credits are half of what I've done. And, there's 5 of me on allmusic.com because somehow AllMusic doesn't understand that I could actually do a rock and roll record and then do a Christian record or a blues record. So, I'm on there like 4 different times for different things.
I've quit trying to organize those.
You can't organize it, and nobody's in charge over there. It's a train on just running down the tracks that nobody's in control of. So,
but at least there's something there. There is something to find out a little bit about people.
But don't worry, the website will get changed. It'll be done soon. And like I said, there's we're not a commercial facility, so.
Oh, no worries. I can strike that question from the record.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, Vance. Really
you got it.
Pleasure, man. Really appreciate you being here. And
All right,
you do
man.
indeed rock.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You do too.
Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Yeah, you got it, dude.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.